My name is Evelyn Parker, and for most of my 72 years, I believed I had done everything right. I was born into a working-class family in the Midwest, raised with little more than faith, grit, and the belief that if you worked hard enough, your children would always love you for it. I married young, at 20, to my late husband, Charles. He was a tall, kind man with rough hands from construction work and the softest smile I'd ever seen. Together we built a life brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, sacrificing every comfort to make sure our two children, Michael and Angela, would never have to live the way we did. We bought a small 3-bedroom house in Oakwood, a quiet suburb where the streets were lined with maple trees that turned fiery red in autumn. That house became my sanctuary, my pride, and eventually the centerpiece of all my sacrifices. Every corner held a story. The front porch was where Charles and I sat with coffee every Sunday morning, planning our week. The dining room table, scratched and worn, was where Angela learned her multiplication tables and Michael practiced his spelling words. Even the basement, damp and unfinished, held memories of Charles building toy chests and bookshelves late into the night. For 50 years, that house was more than wood and plaster. It was the vessel of my family's love. Or so I thought. Charles passed away 10 years ago from a heart attack. It was sudden, brutal. One moment we were arguing over whether to buy a new lawnmower, and the next I was standing in a cold hospital room, staring at his lifeless face. Losing him nearly broke me, but I told myself I still had Michael and Angela. They were my reason to get up each morning, to keep cooking Sunday dinners, to keep tending the roses Charles had planted in the backyard. At first, my children seemed to understand. They came over more often. Michael brought his wife and kids, and Angela called me nearly every day, her voice full of sympathy and concern. "Don't worry, Mom," Angela would say. "We'll take care of you now." And I believed her. As the years passed, I tried to ignore the little things, the way Michael's eyes lingered on the house whenever he visited, the way Angela always asked about my important documents. "Oh, Mom, where do you keep your will? Just in case, you know? We want to make sure we're prepared if something ever happens." She said it with a laugh, but her tone made my stomach twist. I brushed it off. After all, wasn't it natural for children to worry about their aging parent? But soon, those little questions grew sharper. One Thanksgiving, Michael leaned across the table, a glass of red wine in his hand. "Mom," he said casually, "this place is worth a fortune now. You know the market in Oakwood has gone crazy. Houses like this are selling for nearly $1 million. I smiled politely, though the number made me dizzy. "It doesn't matter, Michael. This is our family home. It's not for sale." He exchanged a look with Angela, one I didn't miss. A look that said she doesn't get it. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that my children were still the sweet boy and girl I'd raised, the ones who made me macaroni necklaces on Mother's Day and cried when their father died. But cracks were forming. Angela began visiting less, except when she needed money. Michael stopped bringing his kids around, claiming they were too busy. Phone calls grew shorter, colder. I filled the silence with my cat, Molly, and my rose garden, and I told myself I wasn't lonely. Still, I clung to the belief that deep down, they loved me. That family, no matter what, was forever. One summer afternoon, I had a small health scare. Nothing serious, just a dizzy spell while gardening, but it landed me in the hospital for a night. I'll never forget the way Michael showed up, not with flowers or concern, but with papers. "Mom," he said, laying them on the bed tray, "you should really think about signing over power of attorney. It'll make things easier if you're ever not able to make decisions." I blinked at him, confused. "But I'm fine. The doctor said it was just dehydration." "It's just a precaution," he insisted, pushing the pen toward me. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Something inside me tightened. I didn't sign. That was the first time I truly questioned his intentions. The years that followed felt like a slow erosion of everything I thought I knew. The kids stopped visiting for Sunday dinners. Christmases became rushed phone calls, birthdays forgotten. But every time they did call, it was always about money. "Mom, don't you think the house is too much for you to manage?" Angela asked one evening. "You could sell it, move into a smaller condo?" Use the money for comfort, comfort, as if my comfort was their real concern. I laughed weakly and changed the subject, but inside, fear was growing. Fear that my children didn't see me as their mother anymore, only as a bank account wrapped in wrinkles. And yet, I still loved them. That was my curse. A mother's love doesn't vanish, even when it's betrayed. Some nights I would sit alone in the living room, looking at old photo albums. Angela with her braces and freckles, Michael in his Little League uniform, grinning with a missing tooth. I would press my hand to the pictures and whisper, "Where did you go? Where are the children I raised?" I thought maybe I was paranoid. That grief and loneliness were making me suspicious, until the day the betrayal became undeniable. It was a rainy Tuesday in March when they came to the house together. Michael and Angela, standing on my porch with stiff smiles and umbrellas dripping water onto the welcome mat. "Mom," Michael began, his voice too smooth, "we've been talking. We think it's time you considered moving somewhere. Safer." "Safer?" I asked, frowning. Angela stepped forward, her tone syrupy. "A nursing home, Mom, just for your own good. You're not as strong as you used to be. And keeping up this house, it's too much." My heart thudded in my chest. "This is my home," I said firmly. "Your father and I built our lives here. I'm not leaving." The smiles vanished. What replaced them was something I'll never forget. Cold calculation. Michael pulled out a manila envelope. "You already signed some papers when you were in the hospital, remember? This is just the next step. We'll take care of the details. You just have to trust us." The blood drained from my face. I hadn't signed anything, had I? That moment, the illusion shattered. The children I had raised, the ones I had sacrificed everything for, were gone. In their place stood strangers with my son's eyes and my daughter's smile, but hearts made of stone. I realized with a cold clarity that my family didn't see me anymore. They saw dollar signs, and that was the day the betrayal truly began. The day after Michael and Angela stood on my porch with that manila envelope, the world no longer felt the same. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me wonder if I'd already lost it. I sat in the dark living room, my hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea, staring at the photos on the wall, family portraits from birthdays and graduations. Each smiling face felt like a ghost now. How did we get here? The following week, Michael returned, this time alone. He was dressed in his usual business casual clothes, polished shoes, crisp shirt, tie slightly loosened, but his presence filled the room like a storm cloud. "Mom," he began, placing the same manila envelope on the table, "Angela and I have been talking to some people. We think this is what's best." I crossed my arms, trying to hold on to my strength. "I told you. I'm not leaving my home." He sighed as though I were a stubborn child. "You're making this harder than it has to be. Look, the house needs work. The plumbing's old. The roof leaks. What happens if you fall one night and no one's here to help you?" At Shady Oaks, he slid a glossy brochure toward me. "You'll be safe. Meals provided. Medical staff on call. No worries. I didn't even look at the brochure. I don't need strangers taking care of me. I've taken care of myself my whole life." Michael's jaw tightened. "Mom, don't make us do this the hard way." The words sent a chill down my spine. A few days later, I got a call from my bank. "Mrs. Parker," the teller said, "we just wanted to confirm that you authorized the transfer of $15,000 to your daughter Angela." My breath caught. "What? No?" "I didn't authorize anything." There was a pause. "We have her listed as co-signer on your account." I dropped the phone. My knees went weak, and I had to grip the counter to keep from falling. Somewhere, somehow, they had gotten into my accounts. I thought back to the hospital stay. The forms Michael had pushed toward me, my shaky hand signing, half conscious, thinking it was just medical consent. They had tricked me. The betrayal deepened quickly after that. Bills arrived late, as if intercepted. My credit card was suddenly maxed out with purchases I hadn't made, Angela's signature on the receipts. When I confronted her, she didn't even flinch. "Mom, you don't need all that money just sitting there. We're family. It's all going to come to us eventually anyway. Why not let us use it now?" Her voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, it made me feel insane. "Because it's mine," I whispered, my voice trembling with both anger and heartbreak. "Your father and I worked for every cent. We wanted you to have it when the time came, not before." Angela rolled her eyes. "The time is now, Mom. Don't be so dramatic." The next blow came with a knock at the door. A man in a suit stood on my porch, holding a briefcase and a folder of documents. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked politely. "I'm here regarding the sale of your home." My heart stopped. "Sale? What sale?" He looked confused. "Your son and daughter told us you'd agreed to sell. We already have a buyer interested." I slammed the door in his face, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. That evening I called Michael, my hands trembling on the phone. "How dare you?" I hissed. "This is my home. You had no right," but his voice was cool, detached. "Mom, it's already in motion. We're just trying to take care of you. Stop fighting us." The walls of my life were closing in. Within weeks, my mailbox filled with letters, legal notices, financial statements, paperwork with my children's names scribbled on the signature lines. Every envelope felt like a knife to the chest. I went to a lawyer, desperate for help. But when he looked through the documents, his expression darkened. "Mrs. Parker," he said gently, "from what I can see, your son and daughter already have power of attorney. It will be difficult to reverse without proving coercion. But I never agreed." I protested, tears streaming down my face. "They tricked me," he sighed. "It happens more often than you'd think. Children taking advantage of aging parents. Unless you have proof, the law favors them now." By summer, I was no longer the owner of my own home. The deed had been transferred, the accounts drained, and I was left with nothing but my clothes, a few keepsakes, and Molly the cat. Michael and Angela showed up one morning, both wearing rehearsed smiles. "Mom," Michael said cheerfully, "today's the day. We've arranged everything. The movers will be here at noon." I clutched the doorframe, refusing to move. "I'm not going anywhere." Angela stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. "Please don't make this harder. We've already put a deposit on Shady Oaks. You'll love it there." Her hand brushed my arm, but it felt like a shackle. That was the day they took me away. Shady Oaks wasn't the paradise in the brochure. It was a prison dressed up as comfort. The walls smelled of bleach and loneliness. The nurses were kind enough, but they were strangers. The food was bland, the hallways dim. My room was small, impersonal, a single bed pushed against a white wall. No roses, no photographs, no Charles, and worst of all, no Molly. They wouldn't let me bring her. The first night I cried myself to sleep. Clutching the one photo of Charles I'd managed to sneak into my bag. How could this be my life? How could my own children throw me away like garbage? But as the days turned into weeks, something inside me shifted. At first it was despair, then anger, and finally, resolve, because if Michael and Angela thought they had broken me, they were wrong. They had forgotten who I was. I was Evelyn Parker. I had survived poverty, war, the loss of my husband. I had raised them with my bare hands, worked 2 jobs to put food on their plates, and sacrificed every dream for their comfort. And now, they thought they could betray me, steal everything I had built, and leave me to rot in this place. No, if my family had betrayed me for money, then I would give them one last surprise, one they would never forget. The first month in Shady Oaks was a blur of silence and humiliation. Every morning, I woke to the sound of a bell echoing down the hallway like a cattle call. Breakfast was served on trays that looked identical every day: pale eggs, soggy toast, and watery coffee. Around me, old men and women shuffled with walkers, their eyes dulled by resignation. I told myself I didn't belong here. I wasn't like them, but each time I caught my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, I saw an old woman staring back. Wrinkled skin, tired eyes, fragile hands. Maybe my children were right. Maybe I was just a burden. One evening I overheard 2 nurses talking outside my door. "Did you hear?" one whispered. Her son and daughter bought that big Victorian house in Lakeview. "Spent a fortune renovating it," the other laughed. "Funny how quick they dumped her here after cashing in." Cold world. Their voices drifted away, but the words stayed, carving themselves into my chest. They were living in my house. My garden, my memories, laughing, celebrating, while I sat in this sterile cage. That night, for the first time in years, I couldn't cry. My body was too cold, too numb. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering to the empty room. They think I'm finished. They don't know me at all. Days dragged into weeks. My children rarely visited, and when they did, it was only to drop off forms for me to sign. Angela once brought me a box of cheap chocolates, but even as she smiled, her eyes kept darting toward my bedside drawer, checking if I had any documents hidden away. One afternoon, I asked Michael directly, "Why? Why are you doing this to me?" He didn't blink. "Because, Mom, you had your time. Now it's ours. Stop clinging to the past." That was the moment my grief hardened into something sharper. I knew then I couldn't beg for love from people who had none left to give, but I could make them regret every cruel word. My first ally appeared by accident. Her name was Clara, a nurse's aide in her 30s. She had kind eyes but a sharp tongue, and unlike the others, she didn't treat me like glass. One night, as she refilled my water jug, she noticed me sketching in an old notebook I'd smuggled in. "Didn't know you could draw," she said. Peering over my shoulder, "It's nothing," I muttered, closing the cover. But she smiled. "Looks like plans to me." I froze. She tilted her head. "Whatever you're cooking up, I won't tell. Old folks around here get written off too easily. But I can tell you're not done yet." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Someone saw me, not as a burden, but as a woman still alive. At night, when the halls were quiet, I began writing. Not letters, not diary entries, plans. Notes about my children, their patterns, their greed, memories of conversations, details about the accounts they thought they'd hidden from me. I wasn't helpless. I still had knowledge. I still had secrets. Because what Michael and Angela didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that before Charles died, he'd entrusted me with something. Something powerful, something they would never see coming. I had kept it buried all these years, locked away in silence. But now it would be my weapon. The longer I stayed in Shady Oaks, the more I realized something vital. My children thought they had buried me alive. But in their arrogance, they had given me the one thing I hadn't had in years: time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to sharpen the edges of the truth they had forgotten. I wasn't broken. I was waiting. And when the moment came, Michael and Angela would learn what it meant to betray Evelyn Parker. The first snowfall of the season dusted the windows of Shady Oaks, soft and white, like the world outside was moving on without me. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of bleach and boiled cabbage. I sat by the window, sketching circles in my notebook, my mind wandering back decades to Charles. My Charles. He had been a quiet man, steady as an oak tree, with a laugh that could soften even my worst days. Before he died, we rarely spoke of money. He took care of the finances, while I managed the home and the children. But one winter night, only weeks before he passed, he pulled me aside. "Evelyn," he whispered, his breath shallow, "promise me you'll never tell the children about this. Not unless you have no choice." From beneath the mattress, he produced a weathered lockbox. Inside, I glimpsed documents, bank slips, and a leather-bound ledger. "Charles, what is this?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Insurance policies, stocks, investments? Enough to keep you safe forever." "But I don't trust Michael. I don't trust Angela. They're too hungry." His eyes searched mine. "Promise me," and I did. I promised. After his death, I hid the box in the one place I knew they'd never look: the cellar, beneath a loose floorboard in the old house. When they forced me into Shady Oaks, I thought it was gone forever. But then, late one night, Clara caught me staring out the window, whispering Charles's name. She sat across from me, folding laundry, and asked gently, "What are you holding back, Evelyn?" I hesitated. Then, for the first time, I told someone the truth. Clara leaned in, her eyes sharp. "So you're telling me you've been sitting on a fortune this whole time? And your kids don't know?" "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "And they'd sell their souls to find it." "Then maybe," she said slowly, "it's time you stop being their victim and start being their nightmare." Her words sent a shiver through me. For days afterward, I couldn't stop thinking. My children had stolen my home, my dignity, even my place in the world. But they didn't know I still had the one thing they craved most. And suddenly I realized I could use it. My plan began with small steps. I asked Clara to help me send letters. Not emails, not phone calls. Letters written in my hand, addressed to old friends of Charles, people my children didn't know. One went to Mr. Whitmore, Charles's longtime lawyer. Another to a banker who had once managed their accounts. Each letter contained careful instructions, disguised in the tone of an elderly woman reminiscing. But between the lines, I asked for one thing: confirmation. Confirmation that the fortune was still where it had always been. Weeks later, Clara smuggled a reply into my room, hidden beneath a tray of soup. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a single sentence: the assets remain untouched. The lockbox is still secure. My breath caught in my throat. Charles's secret was safe. And it was still mine. But money wasn't enough. If I simply claimed the fortune, my children would find a way to leech it from me, again and again. No, I didn't want them to just lose. I wanted them to know the taste of despair, to choke on the same bitterness they'd forced on me. And so I began writing letters not just to bankers and lawyers, but to Michael and Angela themselves. Not real letters, no, those would come later. These were drafts, stories, little scripts of the words I would one day deliver. You thought I was weak, you thought I was forgotten, but I've been watching, waiting, and now the burden you threw away is about to return, bigger, heavier, and darker than you ever imagined. Each time I wrote those words, my hand grew steadier, my spine straighter. The Evelyn they abandoned was gone. What remained was something they should have feared all along. One night, Clara found me awake past midnight, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. "You're smiling," she said. Surprised, I touched the corners of my mouth. "Because I've remembered something, Clara." "What's that?" "That the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a monster in the dark," I whispered. "It's a mother with nothing left to lose." And in that moment, my path was clear. The money wasn't just survival, it was my weapon. The game had only just begun. Winter was fading into spring, and with it, my resolve had hardened into something sharp, almost metallic. The Evelyn who shuffled quietly through the halls of Shady Oaks was vanishing, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who no longer wanted pity, but power. Clara saw it before anyone else. "You've got that look again," she whispered one morning while she folded sheets. "Like you're about to burn the whole world down." "Not burn," I said softly. "Reshape." The first step was escape. I couldn't take down Michael and Angela while trapped inside these walls, eating soup that tasted of salt and nothing. Clara had a cousin who worked for a moving company, a man who owed her more than one favor. With her help, I arranged something simple yet audacious: a one-day leave. The staff believed I was going out for a doctor's appointment. In truth, I was going home. When the moving van pulled up to the side entrance of Shady Oaks, my heart pounded like a drum. Clara squeezed my hand. "Are you sure about this, Evelyn?" "Once you do this, there's no turning back," I nodded. I turned back for 73 years. That's long enough. The house looked older than I remembered. The paint peeled, the shutters sagged, and weeds had claimed the garden Charles once tended with pride. But beneath it all, I saw the bones of my life, the place that should have been my sanctuary, not the prison my children turned it into. Inside, dust coated every surface, but the air still carried faint traces of home. I went straight to the cellar. My hands trembled as I pried open the floorboard with a rusted crowbar Clara had found. And there it was, the lockbox. I pulled it out, coughing through the dust, my eyes wet with something that wasn't entirely grief. Clara held the flashlight steady as I turned the key. Inside lay stacks of old documents, faded checks, gold coins that glimmered faintly in the dim light. And most shocking of all, a thick folder of bank accounts still very much alive. Charles had left me not just security, but a fortune. "Sweet Jesus," Clara whispered. "You weren't kidding." I touched the papers gently, as though they might burn me. "This isn't money, Clara. This is justice." The second step was information. I spent the next weeks quietly gathering everything I could about my children. Clara's cousin helped me set up a cheap phone with internet access, and from there, I began digging. Social media, property records, whispered gossip from neighbors who still remembered me. Michael had stretched himself thin in the world of business. Debt, bad partnerships, desperate investments. Angela, meanwhile, had built her life on appearances, country club memberships, designer clothes, a sprawling house she couldn't afford. They were both drowning. And the cruelest twist? They had sent me away because they thought I was a burden, when the truth was, I held the one thing that could have saved them. I smiled for the first time in years. No, I whispered to myself. You don't get saving, you get suffering. The third step was bait. I began sending anonymous letters to Michael and Angela. Not accusations, clues. Each one was crafted to feel like a whisper from the grave, as if Charles himself had reached across time to haunt them. You thought you inherited everything. You thought you buried all the secrets. But not all treasures stay buried forever. Each letter was signed with nothing but a simple E. Within days, I heard from Clara's cousin that both of them were in a panic. Michael had started digging through old records. Angela had begun calling the lawyer's office in a frenzy. They were terrified, chasing shadows. Exactly as I wanted. One evening, Clara found me at the window again, watching the last streaks of sunset fade. You look different, she said carefully. I am different, I replied. My voice was steady, calm. For years, I was the woman they could discard, the woman who cried herself to sleep because she believed love had an expiration date. But now I'm the storm coming for them. Clara smiled faintly. I almost feel sorry for your children. Don't, I said, my eyes hard as stone. They wanted a burden. I'll give them one they'll never forget. And so the game had begun. The fortune was mine. The secrets were mine. The power, finally, was mine. And my children had no idea the reckoning that was about to descend on them. The day of reckoning came faster than I expected. Michael and Angela were unraveling. The whispers I fed them through anonymous letters had turned into full-blown nightmares. Michael was losing investors, convinced someone knew about his shady deals. Angela barely left her mansion, paranoid that her perfect life was about to collapse. But the final blow wasn't fear, it was exposure. I booked a quiet meeting at an old lawyer's office downtown. Clara came with me, her steady presence grounding me. Together, we handed over Charles's old documents, the ones proving his estate had been intentionally hidden. The lawyer, Mr. Harrington, raised his eyebrows. Do your children know these accounts exist? No, I said, my voice sharp as glass. And they never will, unless I want them to. He nodded, understanding instantly. With those accounts, I had enough not only to secure my future, but to tighten a noose around Michael and Angela. I could buy and sell their debts with a flick of a pen. I could strip away everything they'd stolen from me, and that's exactly what I did. Within weeks, Michael received notice that a mysterious buyer had acquired his company's largest debts. The demands were immediate and merciless. He tried everything, loans, investors, begging Angela, but nothing saved him. Angela, meanwhile, woke one morning to find her beloved mansion under foreclosure. Her lavish lifestyle, built on borrowed money, had crumbled overnight. She screamed at the bankers, at her husband, even at Michael. But none of it mattered. The empire they'd built on my suffering was collapsing brick by brick, and then I revealed myself. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no fireworks. Just a quiet dinner invitation. I rented a private dining room at an old restaurant Charles and I once loved. When Michael and Angela walked in, their faces pale and drawn, they froze at the sight of me sitting calmly at the head of the table. Mother? Angela whispered, her voice breaking. Michael's fists clenched. This is you? Yes, I said, steady and cold. Every letter, every debt, every foreclosure. Me. Angela began to cry, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Why? Why would you do this to your own children? Why? I leaned forward, my voice low and fierce. Because you left me to rot in that nursing home. Because you called me a burden. Because you stole the years I should have lived in peace. I begged for love and you gave me chains. So I forged those chains into weapons. Michael slammed his hand on the table. You've ruined us. No, I said, standing tall despite the ache in my bones. You ruined yourselves the day you forgot I was your mother. I gave you life, and now I've given you the lesson you'll never forget. Betrayal has a price. I walked out of that restaurant with Clara by my side, leaving my children in silence, two broken people staring at the ruins of their greed. Did it make me happy? No, revenge rarely brings joy, but it brought justice, and that was enough. These days, I live quietly in a modest home by the sea. Clara visits often. I spend mornings drinking tea on my porch, watching the waves. Charles's fortune ensures I'll never be powerless again. But more than that, the storm inside me has finally settled. I sometimes wonder if Michael and Angela ever think about me, about what they lost. But then I remind myself they had their chance. They chose betrayal, and I chose survival, as I sit here now. At 73 years old, I finally understand. Sometimes, the sweetest justice isn't forgiveness. It's making sure those who wronged you remember your strength until their very last breath.